Thank you everyone for joining. Quick little housekeeping stuff. So we are recording, as I mentioned. Please go ahead and mute yourself. People will be having lunch and maybe bouncing out for other things. So just be sure to mute yourself. Go ahead and use the chat for questions. I will be checking them sort of frequently, but I also have a helper who's helping to kind of flag things if there's something we need to cover. Grab something to take notes and let's go. All right, so about me. So I'm Hargreaves. I'm the founder and CEO of Hargreaves Consulting. I focus on helping my clients turn their ability to execute into their competitive advantage. And so I really specialize in translating those big goals and ideas that they have into actionable plans that their teams can actually get done. I've got experience in everything from pre-revenue startups to Fortune 100 companies. I've seen lots of stuff, and I am passionate about people's ability to get things done when they plan accordingly. All right, so are you in the right place? Let's talk about it. So if you want to effectively turn ideas into action steps, yep, you're in the right place. If you'd like to better integrate the big picture with the day-to-day, I see that a lot where it's kind of the day-to-day stuff gets in the way of those big things you want to get done. And you just want the ability to consistently execute on your most important stuff. So real quick, tell me why you're here. Like, why did you sign up for this presentation? What's most interesting to you? Why does it matter to you personally? Just real quick. All right, awesome. So Sarah's looking for stronger org focus. May is just wants to be able to be consistent in meeting goals. Yes, million things to do and need to better prioritize. That is absolutely a thing. Working out in the weeds and need to remind, yes, zoom out and strategize. That is so true. Balancing next steps. Yes, all good stuff. Thank you so much for that. All of that is so true. It's so easy to get into the minutia of just running your day-to-day business and getting things done. And it's hard to step back and take a minute to figure out what you want to do. And then also hard to take those big ideas back to the day-to-day and actually make them happen. So we're going to talk about that today. So why this matters to me. So I come from a family of entrepreneurs. Everyone in my immediate family has had a business at some point. My dad was a huge ideas guy. He literally, it was pretty much a joke in our family. Like, he was the meme before memes of, what's the $1 million idea? How many would it take to sell to get to $1 million? Like, he was always coming up with ideas, but he was terrible at follow through and execution. Like, just never happened. And it was always such a missed opportunity for me because some of his ideas were actually really good. And I wished that he would have actually done something with them. So I believe, because I've seen it myself, that it's entirely possible for people to take really big, crazy, not sure how we're going to get their ideas and turn them into a real life plan that actually gets done. And I believe that's magic. So why it might matter to you. So you might want big things for yourself or for your company. You have stakeholders, right? Your board, your investors, your employees, your customers, they all have expectations that you're going to manage the here and now, but you're also going to plan for the future. You have the power of possibilities. So you're like, I believe all of these things can happen. And what would happen if it did? And wouldn't that be amazing? Like, thinking big like that is absolutely essential for innovation in a business. But you also need to bring it back to the, kind of brass tacks and get things done. Your belief in your purpose. So let's say your organization is a social impact organization, or you're really trying to make a difference in the world. Great ideas and caring a lot about it are not going to be the thing that's going to get it done. And so you need to be able to translate those things into actionable steps that you can get done. Then you can also mobilize your volunteers and people that care about what you're doing. So this is one of my favorite quotes by Covey. Most leaders would agree they'd be better off having an average strategy with superb execution than a superb strategy with poor execution. And I love this quote for two reasons. One, because it means your idea does not have to be perfect. It has to be good, but sometimes good enough is good enough. So if you execute it superbly, though, you are going to make an impact and you are going to move forward and you are going to, move the needle. Conversely, You can spend, hours and days and weeks and months coming up with the perfect strategy, but if you can't execute it well, it's meaningless. All right, so let's do a little bit of foundation studying about strategic planning and strategic execution. So they're kind of peanut butter and jelly, right? You got to have the plan and the vision. And you also need the execution. So what's part of each of those phases of your planning? During the planning process, you're really going to focus, number one, on leadership alignment. I've seen too many plans fall apart because leadership teams have different ideas about where they want the company to go. It's important to spend time, get away from the office, and figure out what exactly you want to get done and get alignment on those things. You need to crystallize that vision. So a lot of times I work with clients and they're like, yeah, we have vision, mission, values. We can just skip all that part. And I disagree. Your vision is really important, and it's important to setting everything else. So if you set your vision 5 years ago, it's really important to revisit and say, is this still our vision? The world has changed. Our team has changed. Our capabilities have changed. Is that the right vision for us? So you want to crystallize that. You also want to articulate your mission. So what is your purpose for being as a company? Again, the world changes around you and you need to change with it, and you probably have. And so you need to just take a look at that purpose and say, is this where we're going? You want to validate core values. A lot of times I see there's the values on the poster on the wall, and then there's the values of how things actually get done. And that disconnect causes your employees to really kind of question everything that comes out of your mouth. Because if you're saying these are our core values and they know that's not our core values, then that disconnect can be really damaging to both your company and your ability to get things done. So you need to validate those things. You're also going to assess the market and competition. A lot of people do SWOT analysis. You might do a pestle analysis, whatever it is. Know where you're at in the marketplace and how you stack up against your competition. And then finally, you're going to establish some long-term goals. And in today's day and age, a long-term goal could be 3 to 5 years. Like it used to be 10 or 20 years. Where do you want to be? Like I wouldn't even bother. And if you're an early stage company, I would even say 1 year is probably about right. So now we get to execution. So the execution is like literally all the logistics, the nuts and bolts. And the reason this gets mashed up with the day-to-day is because it's the same thing, right? It's the tactical stuff. What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? Who's going to do it? When's it going to get done? And what results are you expecting from those efforts? And then finally, measuring progress. So articulating all of those things in kind of excruciating detail is really important for making sure, one, that you know how you're going to get it done. And so everybody can kind of see, yeah, that seems reasonable. We can get that done. But then also because if you don't articulate all of those things, then the day-to-day is just going to creep back in and get in your way. And we want to prevent that. All right, so some thoughts you might be having. I'm an ideas person. I'm not a details person. Now what do I do? I'm not a project manager and I don't want to be. That is okay. You don't have to be a project manager. How do I get everybody else on board? Like, okay, so we have our leadership team meeting. We all feel good about it. Now, how do we get the rest of the organization on board? And then you might just be thinking easier said than done. I hear a lot of been there, done that, it doesn't work. And I'm going to tell you flat out, it does work. And so so kind of like when you go to the movies and you're seeing all these special effects and crazy stuff and whatever, just suspend the disbelief. Just while you're doing your process, suspend the disbelief because trust me, it'll work. All right, so fact, mic drop, whatever it is, this is possible and you can do it. So let's talk about how. So in your experience, real quick before we get into how does strategic planning and execution fall short of expectations? So where does it fall down? So people have grand plans, they go off, they spend their retreat, they come back all excited. Where does it fall down for you? Or where have you seen it fall down in previous companies? Yes, communicating the vision is hard. Managing the important versus the urgent. That's always a struggle. Getting traction for sure. Engaging the marketplace. That's an interesting one because obviously you want to be sure to like get customers involved and get them part of it. And also you need to fend off competitors at the same time. So it's it's kind of an interesting tactic. Too many competing priorities, exactly. Yeah, aligning the team can actually be really hard. And we'll talk a little bit about that. All right, thank you for those. So this is a quote by Michael Dell, obviously founder of Dell, the company. You don't have to be a genius or a visionary or even a college graduate. You just need a framework and a dream. I believe that because I've seen it, there is no shortage of dreams out there. There's a shortage of frameworks and plans and specific tactics to get you where you want to go. So I'm going to provide a little framework for you that I think will be very helpful. So this is one I came up with called Decide, Plan, Act. It's a strategic planning and execution framework. We're going to go through each of these columns, so I'm not going to go through them all together. But basically, the idea is you decide where you want to go, you plan how you're going to get there, and then you act accordingly, and you communicate foundationally across all of it. So the next few slides are going to get a little dense, but bear with me because this is the meat of it. Okay, so when we're doing vision and mission values, you're going to want to focus on a few things. So getting some energy around the big idea, both from your leadership team and from your employees. It's really important that everybody be kind of focused on what is that big thing, because everybody's making little micro decisions every day across their job. And if they have a choice between two things, they may choose what's easiest or what's quickest or what's cheapest or whatever. But if they know that you're going in a particular direction and they feel it in their bones, they're going to make decisions that are going to help you get there in little tiny incremental ways that you won't even notice, but it will help. You're also going to focus on a motivational purpose. So helping people tie what they do to getting you where you want to go. Their particular impact in making a difference to achieving your goals is really important. And then again, values. So who you are. So if you think about, what are the values of your organization? Now that you've hammered them out and it's how things are for real, like how are those values represented in your vision, mission, and values? Things you want to watch out for are differing visions. So again, you can't have the meeting after the meeting to talk about what's really happening. Okay. I'm going to ask if someone could just mute. No. Sorry about that. Okay, so differing vision, a purpose that's about money. So your purpose is not about money. You will make money if you do what you're planning to do, and assuming that you have revenue goals related to it, you will make money, but that can't be your purpose, right? So is you work at a medical organization, are your employees conducting lab tests or are they curing cancer? Like what's your purpose, and make it about more than money. And then aspirational values. So again, if you think one of your values are innovation, but actually that's not a core value for you, really you have other core values, then don't put it on the wall because it's not going to help you any. All right, so then goals and objectives. We're going to focus on the right size goals. It's really important to choose the right size goals. And I think people kind of feel like, yeah, we came with this idea and it's the right size goal. Two things to look out for. One is too big of a goal. So it's laughable and nobody's going to believe that you're going to achieve it in the time frame you talk about. Or it's too small and it's not motivating. Nobody cares. Like, we can get that done in the first 3 months of the year. It's not interesting. So focus on the right size goals. You want to make your objectives SMART. So again, it's specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, and time bound. So you're going to put some specificity around it. And then what are you going to stop doing? Like, this is so critical. And I see this all the time. And some of the folks I've mentioned, the day-to-day gets in the way of getting things done. And the reason it does is because, one, it's not like anyone was standing around looking for things to do before you went into your strategic planning meeting. So they're already busy and they already have a million things going on. So if you pile one more thing on, then something's going to get lost, right? But the other thing is, it takes time to stop doing things sometimes. And so you need to be able to plan for that and say, if we're doing this thing and it doesn't really add value or align with where we're going, we need to make a plan for stopping doing that thing. So kind of being aware of what you're going to stop doing is really important. Watch out for tackling too much. And I would say too much too fast. So oftentimes I have a tool that I use that's kind of a sanity check when people are doing strategic planning, because oftentimes people will go, oh yeah, we can get that done in this amount of time. We can get that done in the first quarter. We can do it. And then when we plot it out on a timeline and they realize, okay, they're going to get everything they said they're going to get done in the first 4 months of the year. Like, that's never going to happen. First of all, because things are going to take longer, but then also there's dependencies, right? So I might have to finish this thing before I can start this other thing because we're dependent on that other thing being finished. So let's plot all that out and be realistic. So it doesn't mean, you know, we're going to downsize our goals or anything like that. It just means like plan for it, because if you don't plan for it, then it's going to be a gotcha later and you don't want that. Okay, and then the last part is strategy. So you're going to focus on playing to your strengths. You're not going to try and solve every possible thing you could be doing better. Focus on your strengths. If there's a weakness, shore it up if you need to, or get rid of it if you don't need it. You're going to look for opportunities in the market. So you might know that the market is going in a particular direction and you really feel like you can tackle what's next. And maybe you feel like you've seen it before everybody else has seen it. If that's a capability for you, you should plan on how to get there before everybody else does. And again, focus on your competitive differentiators. So if everybody's doing a thing, it's going to become commoditized and it'll be a race to the bottom price-wise. Don't spend your time there. Spend your time on things that are going to add real and new value for your customers. Watch out for analysis paralysis. So one of the things that I tell people is do your homework around and bring your data to the meeting, right? It's important to have that data, but you could also spend days and weeks and months just looking at data, and that's not going to help you any. So really the data you should bring is data you think is going to help you bring or make those most important decisions. So bring data about your customers, about sales and marketing, about product, things that are going to actually help you with those decisions. You don't need to boil the ocean on this. Don't get caught up in short-term thinking either. So one of the things that I see is people are focused on, well, we're making a ton of money on this particular thing right now, so we should do more of that. And that may be true if you're making a ton of money on that thing, and that's also where the market is going. But we've seen examples of companies that really focus on the thing that they're making a ton of money at, ignoring where the market is going, and suddenly 3 years from now, they're completely left behind. The other thing you don't want to do is ignore potential risks. And when you talk about risks, everybody kind of gets like, oh, snooze fest. Like, I don't want to talk about risks. It seems boring and whatever. It's really important that you be cognizant of the risks, even if you decide you're not going to do anything about it. Identifying those risks lets you make that decision consciously rather than having it sneak up on you and your employees later. All right. Let's go to the next one. Oops. So planning then. So you're going to focus on clarity and defining your done. So this is going to be super important. So if you think about, you assume, okay, we're going to set this sales target of, we're going to increase revenue by 10%, which seems on the surface very clear and straightforward. But what do you actually mean by that? Like, is it a particular type of customer and you want more of them? Is it a particular dollar increase? Is it a percent increase? Or, you know, what is it? Because that'll help you determine how to measure it. The other thing you want to do is kind of say, okay, we've defined what we're going to do and what done looks like, and we know how we're going to measure it. The person on the street test is kind of this hypothetical idea, like you could just go out to any person on the street who knows nothing about how you run your business or what you do, and they could come in and say, this is an articulation of the goal they were trying to achieve. This is the measure that they said they were using to measure it. And if those things align, then you could say objectively, yes, you hit your goal. And, you know, while you're not going to go grab a person on the street to tell you that, it's really important that you do that, because that's going to help you in all kinds of ways when it comes to measuring and assessing your impact. So things to watch out for here are making assumptions. So again, I've seen this a lot where we make an assumption that everybody understands what a percent increase in a particular type of product sales means. And when it gets down to brass tacks and how we're actually going to measure, then it's really actually not so clear, because we don't have a clear measure, or we're not sure where we're pulling the data from. So anyway, don't make any assumptions, document all of it. Also vague language, you know, kind of talking about, well, we want to increase our market share. You know, it seems fairly straightforward. Not really. Like you need to figure out like, how is that measured in your industry and where are you going to get that information and how quickly can you get that information? Also, we'll figure it out later. I see that a lot, especially when people get tired in planning meetings. They're like, well, we'll figure that one out later. They don't figure it out later. So you got to make sure that you're like, let's button this up. If we need to talk about it for the next half hour, let's talk about it for an extra half hour. All right. And then accountability. So focus on everything has an owner. Literally everything has an owner. So your goals, your big goals, you might have, 3, 4 of them maybe for the year. Those are each going to have an executive sponsor or an owner, and those are going to be something that they're going to focus on. Each of your objectives is going to have an owner, and they're probably going to be the one who's either going to be doing the work or they're going to be supervising the people doing the work, coordinating their activities, whatever it is. Also, something that people often forget is communication around the plan and progress and how you're doing. That also needs an owner. It might be somebody on the executive team, but it might be somebody that you choose, who's kind of a rock star doing that stuff within your organization. They're the person who's going to focus on that. And then the plan itself needs an owner. And that's a myth that I see all the time is people kind of assume that, well, we're all going to do our parts and it's all just going to work out. And with nobody tracking the details and kind of keeping the plan itself in front of people, it does fall apart. And that's unfortunate because people often don't realize it until it's too late. So things to watch out for are multiple owners. I see this all the time, like, well, so-and-so and their partner, they're going to do this thing. It's like, well, we need one owner because it's really important for us to be able to go to that person and say, where are we at? What's happening? And if that person leaves, it is very clear that we need to fill that spot. Also watch out for overloading any one person. This I see a lot where there's usually a handful of rock stars in any company that are just kind of like the get stuff done people, right? Like everybody goes to them like there's some weird project or this new thing or whatever, and they go to that person and they're like, hey, we're going to have this person do it. Okay. And then we put it on the sanity check chart and we say, okay, well, of our 8 objectives or 10 objectives, Jana is handling 8 of them. Like that's not possible unless we're going to just make this Jana's full-time job. So it's really important that you don't overload one person, spread the wealth, give people stretch assignments. People want to participate in this big stuff, so let them. And then also staff changes. So I mentioned this, if you're not tracking owners of specific objectives and then the tactics that go underneath them, sometimes someone leaves the company or moves to a different job and nobody realizes that thing actually isn't happening anymore. And that thing turns out to be critical for something else. And then things get delayed or behind or whatever. And so it's really important to watch for those things. And then visibility. So one of the things that I see a lot is the leadership teams will keep the plan, like this is our plan and we're going to do this. And they kind of go out and they say, we have a plan and now go do these things. And there really isn't a connection between what people are doing and the plan itself because nobody has any visibility into the plan. So you want information about the plan, your progress, how you're measuring impact to be visible to everyone. And obviously there's going to be some things that are like, okay, HR issues, whatever, like those need to be set aside. But from a, how are we going to make our revenue goals? How are we going to cut our expense goal, make our expense goals, whatever it is, make that as visible as you can. Use visibility of the plan to encourage teamwork. So people like to help. And if you said, hey, someone is struggling over here with this particular thing, it's really important. Does anybody have any ideas about how we can get this back on track? Lots of people will raise their hand, guaranteed. So you want to allow people to participate in this, both because it helps people to feel part of it, but then also it gives them opportunities to help. And people like that. Also freshness of data. So this goes to everything has an owner. Somebody should be responsible for updating the data in your plan. So if you've got a Google Sheet out there somewhere or whatever, or you have a dashboard, somebody should be responsible for making sure that's updated all the time, because if it gets stale, nobody's going to look at it anymore. Things to watch out for here are public blaming and shaming. And nobody starts out intending to do this. But if you have a bunch of things that are all in red and one person's name is next to them, that doesn't feel good for that person. So if you start to see that happening, go to that person, because it could be that they're overloaded, that we didn't take enough stuff off their plate. Maybe they're in over their head, they need help, whatever it is. Like, swarm that issue and help them get back on track, because it doesn't make anybody feel good to know that they're, they're like the public person who's not getting their work done. So we don't want it to be that. Don't omit bad results. So sometimes people are like, well, this is going to be demotivating for people if we tell them we didn't hit a thing that we intended to do. And it's actually really important to share that, because there's reasons for it, right? I mean, there could be a multitude of reasons for it. And if you don't know why, it's likely that there are other people in your organization that do. So bring them in, talk about it, but be sure to share the bad results and then ask for input about how you can do better. And then beware the pull of the day-to-day. I swear it's like a magnet. Like, literally the day-to-day is just going to pull you back and pull you back. It's like gravity. It just pulls you back. And that's another important reason to make sure that there's visibility into what's happening. And if things start to slip, it could be the day-to-day. And again, we need to address and shuffle and do whatever you need to do to get out of that. All right, so then the third pillar is act. So during this phase, we're going to focus on managing. So while we're managing, we're going to focus on attention to detail. So this is really, again, there's going to be people in your organization who thrive in doing this, and, we'll be happy to help you manage the attention to detail, but this is where you really need to focus on it. You're also going to look at frequent reviews, and I'll talk during communication about kind of a cadence for reviewing things. And then swarming the issues. Again, if something's falling apart, it's nobody's fault. We're going to assume that there's something wrong with the system, not the person, and we're going to swarm that issue, figure it out, and get it back on track. So things to watch out for are changing definitions, changing deadlines, and changing metrics. And so what I mean by this is, if you come to your monthly meetings, it's kind of a review meeting, and all of your objective owners are at the meeting and they're talking about this thing, and you hear a lot of, well, I talked to so-and-so and it sounds like this isn't going to be able to be done this quarter, so we're just going to move it to next quarter. Like, that stuff shouldn't be happening. It should kind of be a red flag. And typically what I recommend is that the executive sponsor has to sign off on all of those things, and it has to be discussed during your monthly check-in meetings to understand why this happened. Not because we want to say like, oh, light bulb over their head, like, this is a bad thing that happened and we need to get to the bottom of it. It's really like, what did we miss and how could we do better next time? So those are the things to focus on during measuring. We want to focus on leading indicators. So if you're going to say, well, okay, we want to increase closed deals by 10% over the next quarter or the next 6 months or whatever it is, then a leading indicator for that might be the number of leads coming in, or it might be the number of sales conversations happening, or it might be the number of proposals you put out. So what are some leading indicators that can give you a chance to actually address an issue that's coming down the road before it actually becomes an issue? The other thing to think about is, what's the best measure of your impact? Is that sometimes people measure what they know how to measure, or what's easy to measure, or they already have a measure that seems like it's applicable, but it's really not the best measure. So one of the things that you'll want to focus on really is, what is the right measure that's going to show an impact of the work that you're doing? The other thing is source of data. So if you think about, okay, so we have this metric. So let's say it's the number of deals that include our new product that we just rolled out, last month or last year or whatever. What is the source of that data? Is the source of the data going to be that the proposal included that product? Is it going to be that the product actually got turned on for the customer? Is it going to be that we see usage for the customer? So it's kind of like, where do you want to pull the data, and what's going to be most meaningful for you? And again, that goes back to your goals. So usage might actually be a better measure if your goal is to increase the stickiness of your products. So things to watch out for here are lagging indicators. So again, measuring something after the fact is important, but it's not going to help you catch a problem before it gets solidified and it's already there. Like, try and catch it before it becomes a problem. Don't measure what's easiest. And then data subjectivity. So objective data is best. when you can get it. Subjective data is difficult because that leads to squishiness, and that leads to, well, we're close enough. And sometimes close enough is close enough, but I would say when you're going after big things, close enough usually is pretty far away. All right, so then when we're adapting, so we're going to be managing and measuring, and we're going to learn a ton of stuff. So during the adapt phase of things, we're going to focus on amplifying what's working. So we're seeing things that are working, processes, how we're handling things, and we're going to amplify that and really spread it and make sure that everybody knows how to do those things. We're going to catch issues early, remember, because we're measuring leading indicators and we're managing the heck out of it. And we're going to regroup when necessary. Sometimes things just aren't going well. Like, this is just not going to happen. And so it's important to, one, recognize that, the earlier the better. And two, be able to kind of get back together and say, okay, is it the objective that's the problem? Is it the measure that's the problem? Is it our execution of it that's the problem? Kind of diagnose it. And that leads to the things to watch out for. So these seem to be competing answers, but I want to talk about it. So continuing to do what's not working. So if you keep doing something and you continue to get terrible results and you don't take any action on it, that's not good. The flip side of that is don't change direction at the first sign of trouble, right? So it's kind of a diagnostic exercise to understand what's working, what's not working, and figure out kind of how you need to adjust and adapt as you go. And then lastly, communicate. So you're going to communicate throughout this whole process, obviously. So things to focus on during communication are really transparency, frequency, and consistency. So share as much as you can. Again, there might be things that you can't share, confidential stuff, acquisitions, whatever, things that might be happening. You can't share all of it, but you can share a lot of it, and you should share as much as you can share. Frequency. It's really important for people to expect that you're going to be communicating things. They will watch for it. They will, talk amongst themselves about what they heard. It's really important that you kind of be out in front of the story, as it were. And then consistency. So schedule some times, create a calendar, communication calendar, when you're going to communicate with people and about what, and make sure you do it. And people will start to expect it and watch for it. And that's a great thing. Things to watch out for are corporate speak. So again, corporate speak kind of tends to feel like you're not really telling us the real truth, or you're trying to spin it or whatever. So try and avoid it at all costs. This is not for customer consumption. This is for internal consumption. So make sure you're as real as possible. Don't provide incomplete information. And I will asterisk this by, if you need to provide incomplete information, call it out, say it's incomplete, and tell people why. And maybe there's, something that needs to be fixed that they can help with. And also don't sugarcoat bad news. I think there's two flavors of this. One, sugarcoating and telling it like it's better than it is, and everybody's shocked when things didn't turn out the way we wanted it to. And then there's also kind of shooting the messenger and not allowing people to bring bad news, especially early. And I like to say bad news, like the smell of garbage, does not get better over time. So the sooner you communicate, the better. And that accounts for your overall corporate communications as well. Don't sugarcoat the bad news, because it doesn't make anything better. Okay, key messages here. So you're going to talk about your vision, mission, and values. You're going to basically, anytime your your employees get together, you're going to talk about vision, mission, and values. Where are we at? What do we stand for? How do we do what we do? You're going to talk about expectations, talk about progress. Like, here's what we expected to happen. Here's what actually happened. And here's how we feel about it. You're going to celebrate your wins, because that's really important, and it's motivating for people to feel like things are going well. And you're also going to recognize people who are doing great work. That's really important. One, because people who are doing great work like to be recognized for doing great work, at least that people are noticing their efforts, but also it inspires other people to want to do great work as well in the area that they are part of. So again, get people into the habit of expecting useful information and updates. And if you forget, they'll remind you. And if they remind you, that means you're doing it absolutely right, because people should be expecting to hear from you about these important things. Okay, so let's talk about cadence. And obviously this isn't, everything you need to do, because it's a little column in a slide, but on a weekly basis, you should be talking about your tactics. So the people who own those tactics should be talking with their manager and the objective owner about where they're at and what's happening. That should be happening at least weekly, maybe one-on-ones or whatever. And celebrating wins and challenges. That can happen, on just a day-to-day basis. On a monthly basis, all of your objective owners are going to get together with your leadership team, share the progress of those objectives and any issues that they've had, and probably rank them as to not started yet, it's on track, it's a little bit at risk, or it's at serious risk. And the things you're going to want to talk about in that meeting are the things that are at risk in some way, because again, everybody swarms the issues. It's not about the person, it's about the issue that we're going to solve together. We're going to also talk about key milestones. So did we hit some? Did we close some out? Do we have some coming up? Let's talk about it. And then again, wins and challenges. And this is a great way to recognize some of those sort of mid-level managers or directors who, they do a lot of the work, but they may not own some of the stuff. And so it's a great way for them to get called out for doing great work. And then on a quarterly basis, you're going to talk about with your leadership team progress against your overall goals for the year. And this is really important because again, you're going to kind of evaluate, did we get everything done that we need to get done this quarter? What do we think is up for the next quarter? Does that seem reasonable, doable? Do we need to rejigger anything? It's really important to, again, get alignment from everyone that we feel like we can handle this. Again, celebrate key milestones, talk about the ones that are coming up, recognize people for doing great work, and then plan for the next quarter. So let's get specific about what we're going to do and then communicate that out to everyone about here's the thing we're going to focus on this quarter. And in general, people get excited about that stuff. Okay, so that's a lot. Let's just take a deep breath for a minute. So, okay. So in your experience, what part of this is going to be the hardest for your team? So go ahead and put it in the chat. Like what things do you just expect is going to be a struggle? Because there probably will be struggles. But again, if it was easy, it wouldn't be motivating. So yes, the decide stage for sure. Getting everyone aligned can honestly be the toughest part, especially if you have a lot of really smart people who've been around for a while and they all know their stuff. They're all going to have an opinion about how it needs to get done. And so getting alignment is really important. That goes back to setting the bigger vision and hopefully, getting people on board. And honestly, sometimes you can't get people on board and then you need to help them find something else. And I guess that sounds a little harsh, but the reality is you can't be fighting amongst yourselves if you're going to make progress over time. So it's important to acknowledge those things. All right. So what you don't need to do, you don't need to go it alone. So as a leadership team, you're going to meet, get together, talk about everything, but you're not going to know everything you need to know in order to get your full plan all done. There's going to be subject matter experts you're going to need to talk to. They're going to have a better sense of how long things are going to take, what resources might be needed. As you take these plans into your budgeting cycle, they're also going to know like, hey, are we going to need some outside money? Do we need to hire a new person, whatever. So don't feel like you need to go it alone. Also, this is going to sound completely contradictory when I say don't focus on details during the planning. You will need to focus on some details, but don't try to do all of the details because again, you won't have all the information you need. And it's important for you to focus on what you need to do in order to communicate this to the next level of leaders to help them help you figure out the rest of those details. The other thing you don't want to do is get derailed by tangents. So create a parking lot, put it up on the wall. And when things start to go sideways, you need to call time and say, hey, this is really important stuff. We totally need to talk about this, but it's not something that we need to focus on right now for strategic planning. So let's table that and talk about it later. And then actually talk about it later because it's really important. Otherwise people think like the parking lot's the recycle bin. And you don't need to use fancy software. So I know there's a lot of software out there and some of it's pretty cool, but you don't need it. I've seen amazing strategic plans completely executed flawlessly using an Excel spreadsheet or a Google Sheet or whatever. And people were getting amazing things done before software even existed. So you don't need it. If you have it, use it, but don't feel like you need it. So again, you're going to focus on alignment. You're going to ask for objections. So this is one where people kind of like, I don't know. I don't want to stir things up. I don't want to have a, difficult conversation, whatever. I promise you, It is much easier to have the conversation with the 7, 8 people, 10 people, maybe that's in your strategic planning meeting, than it's going to be to play whack-a-mole with those conversations through your entire organization. So ask for the objections, make a decision, get everybody in alignment, and then everybody, the entire leadership team will be able to answer those questions when they come up in the broader organization. Look at your dirty laundry. So I don't mean actual laundry, but what I mean is there are things that aren't the best that are kind of happening in lots of areas of the company, and people, leaders especially, often tend to feel like, I will take care of this. This is my area of responsibility. I will go ahead and handle this. Everybody else doesn't need to worry about it. That may be true, but it also could be that you have a wrong seat situation, or it could be that it's something that could be solved another way, or it could be something that might be part of a thing that you're moving forward with, and everybody needs to know that if they're depending on that person or the resources or whatever it is. So look at the dirty laundry, make it okay for leaders to bring issues in their areas of responsibility that they might want to talk about. It's really important. Require full participation. So by this, I mean two things. One, there's going to be introverts and extroverts, and some people talk through, their ideas and they kind of get to where they're going by talking it out. Other people prefer to sit back and listen and think and ponder. Both of those are amazing, but you need to pull in the introverts and you need to pull back the extroverts to ensure that everyone gets heard. So it's important to kind of manage things that way. The other thing that I would say is if you have a meeting, particularly if you have people who are flying in for this and need to catch flights, everyone needs to stay for the entire time. You can't have people leaving at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon because they have to catch flights, they have to get home. Like, it doesn't work. One, because there's really important stuff happening in the last 2 to 3 hours of the meeting, and two, because everybody needs to be present to make these decisions. So it's really important that people plan accordingly. So if you need to make it virtual because people just can't travel and get there and back when they need to, then do it. But everybody needs to be there the entire time. You also need to assign owners for everything. We talked about every single thing needs an owner and one owner, and that person is accountable. And you can help that person be accountable. You can provide for support for them, but ultimately they need to be able to raise their hand and say if they're having trouble, or say, ta-da, we did it. And we celebrate that success. And then lastly, get a verbal commitment from everybody in the room. So this is one thing where it seems silly, but getting a verbal commitment from every person in the room does two things. One, it ensures that everybody's on the same page, because you'll hear hesitation when people say, yes, I'm committed to the success of this endeavor. But also, publicly committing to doing something kind of commits them to doing something. So it's really important that you get that verbal commit. It's not, we all adjourn for the meeting. Wow, that was a great time. We go back to our desks and assume that everybody's committed to it. No, let's ask and just make sure. So keys to success are alignment and clarity. I know I've said this 1,000 times, but it's totally true. Focus on those things. Consistent communication is also going to be a key to success. Regular progress reviews, plan for shiny objects. So this is something we didn't spend a ton of time on. I do have some resources about how to do that, but basically what you want to do is put some criteria in place to evaluate new things that come along. You're going to roll out your plan in January, everyone's going to be really excited about it, and then 2 months later, some big customer is going to ask for a special thing that's going to require a big effort from your team, and you're going to have to make a decision. And at that point, you need to decide, does that thing that they're asking for, yeah, it's going to make us a lot of money, but is it going to derail the bigger picture? If it is, you got to say no. And you got to, regardless of who's asking, and you got to put some criteria in place so that it's really an objective decision and not a subjective one. And again, celebrate your successes and recognize great work. So where to start? When you leave this meeting, maybe not when you leave this meeting, but when you're ready, get the meeting scheduled, get the right people there. Sometimes there's actually people who aren't on your leadership team, but you do typically include them in the meeting. So make sure that they can be there as well. Vibe check the team. So we didn't talk about this a lot, but I have a survey that I typically do that I send out to the people who are going to participate. And this really helps get at some of the baggage people might have about, strategic planning generally, about things that they've been just kind of holding on to, that they either you need to discuss it or, you know, they need to bring it to the table or whatever. It's just a good way to kind of like suss out things that might drag you down or cause friction that you won't even know about. Gather your data ahead of time. So figure out what things are most important to getting you where you want to go, and then commit to the process. All right. Thank you. So any questions on any of that? I realize it's been a jam-packed, let's see, 45 minutes. So 50 minutes. So does anybody have questions? You can feel free to put it in the chat or unmute yourself. All right, either everyone's fallen asleep or I've answered all questions. I'm not sure how to feel about that. Okay. All right, awesome. Oh, thank you guys. Thank you, I appreciate that. Okay, good. Well, again, this is being recorded, so if you want to listen to it again, you know, feel free. I'll send a link to that as well and send out the details if you want them, resources, anything. And if you have any questions, just feel free to, you know, connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to answer questions. I enjoy doing that. All right, well, I think we're adjourned then. Thank you guys. Appreciate it very much.